Hi everyone, welcome to week 4. First off, I'd like to say you guys have done a great job over the last week with the discussion board posts. I've seen a lot of improvement and excellent work. I want to talk a little bit about our APA papers. For many of you, this is the first time you've written in APA, and for a lot of you, it's the first time you've written for a collegiate level course, especially using APA. So just want to hit a couple of the highlights, and then also talk about a couple some of the do's and don'ts that I've noticed as I've been grading your papers. So the first thing is, please try to submit your paper in Microsoft Word. The templates are all in Microsoft Word. Some of you did produce some PDF files, and some try to use some other word processors. But I can tell you Microsoft Word is probably the easiest one to use. It's also the easiest one for us to grade with as well. That way I can see where all your spaces are, and I'm able to help provide good constructive feedback. There is a free version from Embry-Riddle. If you go to the ERAU Ernie website, look for Microsoft Office. There's a free version that you can download as a student, and I'll link it to your student account, and then you'll get PowerPoint, Microsoft Word, and the entire suite of products from them as well. It's an excellent deal. So recommend if you don't have the Microsoft products that you go ahead and download that from the Riddle website. Let's talk about references a little bit. So some of you have used websites for references, some have used books for references, but most of you guys are getting it off of the web. So let's talk about what makes a good reference and what doesn't make a good reference. So remember, there's a good section on Wikipedia usage. I know a lot of you, when you search on your search engine or Google or something, that the first thing that pops up is a Wikipedia article. And I can tell you right now, that is not a scholarly reference to use Wikipedia and cite Wikipedia itself. Now, that doesn't mean I discourage the use of Wikipedia. Wikipedia is great. But if you go to the very end of Wikipedia there, it'll give the references that it was used to create that Wikipedia page. And oftentimes those are good scholarly references that you can start with. And then you can cite from there as well if it qualifies. So remember, Wikipedia, anybody can edit that. Anybody can create a web page and state facts. There's also web pages that are advertisements. So if you look at a product advertisement per se and you're trying to cite facts and figures off of that, that's not necessarily a good place to get numbers from, because sometimes those numbers are inflated or not factual. So look for good scholarly references. So what do I mean by that? You can look at the Embry-Riddle library that has a great listing of publications you can use. Magazine articles are good. If you're going to get facts and figures like this last assignment had, going to manufacturer websites, actually using handbooks and manuals, those are all good things. And anything that's published from a publisher, you can utilize and cite. Also, if you're going to use that, make sure you cite your sources. So if you are putting down facts and figures, you need to cite where those numbers came from or where those ideas came from. So create your idea, write about the idea that you're trying to state, what you're trying to bring across in your paper, and then use the facts and figures to support what you are trying to say. And those facts and figures, make sure you cite. So that's how I expect you to use references and citing. Next, we'll talk about formatting. So that's why you have you're looking at a screenshot here from the APA 7th edition student paper template. So APA, all it is a way of writing papers. It's a methodology of writing papers and a formatting. So the formatting piece is something that I saw some students struggle with over the last week. So you can use this template. This template is earlier on in the course. You can download it. And all you have to do is you can delete out some of these items that are over here. And all the notes. It's all written here from Professor Jorgensen, wrote this entire thing. And you can just delete all these out and save it as a template and use this as your template. So the spacing in there, the spacing to your header matters. The spacing between and what content is there on your title page matters. The fact that you have your page number there matters. And then it'll move down into abstract and different heading levels. So first off, for these papers that we're doing, these 2 to 3 page papers, an abstract is not required. So you can just skip right over the abstract there. For your longer papers and future courses, you will have to have an abstract for sure. Next, when you get into the body, the title right here, each of these are called heading levels. So the centered, bolded heading title right here is your heading level 1, your first heading level. And then as you get further down, you'll see your different heading levels change. So here's heading level 2, which is left, justified, bolded. And then Heading level 3 will be italicized, etc., etc. And that's all spelled out here for you. For the most part, I expect you guys to at least have one heading level. You will have one heading level. And then if you want to go further down just to organize your thoughts, that's a great way of organizing your paper. For this version of APA, you're doing the student paper template. So for the student paper template, this heading level right here, the very first one, is just a repeat of the title of your paper. And then in this introduction, you're just going to introduce what you are trying to what you're going to say in the paper. So you can read about different techniques on how to do that, but this is where you're going to start with the introduction there, and then you'll get into the facts and figures as you get further along. Couple trends that I saw was in this beginning portion here is that you weren't necessarily focusing on what was in the assignment. So read what the assignment is describing you, and then write your paper around that and not going off on too many tangents. Remember, 2 to 3 pages, at least 2 pages, no greater than 3 of work in your body is not very much space to write in. So try to avoid going off on tangents and getting off into details that aren't necessarily addressing the point of the paper. So for the last paper we just wrote, I wanted you to compare and contrast 2 different airplanes, specifically the performance of them. So you want to make sure you get into how different designs affect their performance, and then compare and contrast the two. So that would be the focal point of your paper, and then you're going to use cite your sources and your resources to support what you were saying. So let's talk a little bit about citing in the text. So in-text citations, after you've written something, you need to have an in-text citation, which is at the end of the sentence or in the sentence. So in-text citations, and then that reference will be in the bottom at your very last page in your references section. So you can see Professor Jorgensen put a lot of effort and put a lot of notes in there on exactly how to format that. So really pay attention to the formatting, because APA formatting does matter for this. Then if you're going to quote something, there's different ways of quoting. So please read through that, and that's going to be an excellent resource. All right, here's the references page at the very end. So again, references centered, bolded, and then listed alphabetically in this format. So there's a bunch of different ways to reference things, such as if you're referencing videos or if you're referencing a web page, etc. But the big picture is the reader needs to be able to look at a reference and be able to know exactly how to get to the fact that you were stating. So that's why references exist, and that's why they're stated there. So I should be able to look at a reference and then either click on a link or go to a website or look in a library for the specific article that you are referencing and be able to find exactly the reference that you're putting forward there. So like I said, this paper here is at the very beginning of the course. I would highly recommend that you download it. You can delete out all the comments and everything in there. And Professor Jorgensen put a whole section there exactly how to do that, and use that as your template. And then if you just fill that paper format in, it'll help you write your paper and not have to worry so much about formatting, and you can more focus on the content of the paper. I know this class is not a writing class, but for many of you, it is your very first collegiate level online course, and with that comes a lot of writing, and that will be the trend throughout your time here at Embry-Riddle. I want to show you another great resource here, and that is the APA Style website. So if you go to apastyle.apa.org, this is a great resource for helping to write as well. So remember, you have the manual for this class that you should all be using. That's your source document for everything, but this web page is part of APA, and it will help break down the concepts that are in that manual. If you click on Instructional Aids, on that tab, scroll down on the Instructional Aids tab and go to Sample Papers. And if you click there and then scroll down, you can download a sample paper. So remember, Professor Jorgensen already has done that with cites and notations. This is a clean one where you can just delete out the data in the paper itself and then replace it. And then here's an annotated sample paper. So if you click on the annotated sample paper, this is a great description of exactly the formatting in your APA paper. So if you just read along the margins there, it'll tell you all of the different aspects of it. So using first person, if you're going to talk in the first person on there, how do you use citations, when to use italics, when not to, how to use multiple authors, how to use different levels of headings, how to cite data, how to use charts, all of that. So if you're going to put it in your paper, I would take a look at this document and look and see exactly if you are formatting it correctly into your paper. Like I said, 2 to 3 pages isn't too much, so you should be able to get that done without too much of a problem. Okay, let's talk real quick about the common mistakes that were on this last assignment. So we already talked about the references there, and then citing an ATA. So like I said, look exactly at the template and cite according to that. So I saw, the Wikipedia style where there's a hyperlink. I saw just listing a website. So all of those are incorrect. You need to look exactly at the APA style of citing. The other thing that I saw is not answering the question that was in the assignment. So read the assignment, read exactly what you have to describe, and answer that question in your 2 to 3 pages without going off on tangents. So be very specific when you answer the question that is being asked, because that's how your paper is going to be graded. The other thing that I saw was folks had a conversational tone in their paper. So they were talking as if we were just talking right now. So remember, this is a scholarly paper that you're writing, a collegiate level paper, not just having a two-way conversation. So it shouldn't be written as a conversational piece. It should be written as a paper. And then remember, this paper, the purpose of this paper is to show that you've read the material, that you understand the material, and you're summarizing the concepts within this paper as you submit it to me. So I want you to try to use concepts that you learned earlier on in the reading from that week in the paper. And then finally, last thing is proofread your paper. So reread your paper to yourself. If the sentence doesn't make sense, write it again or change it around a little bit. So there's a lot of papers where I just read them from start to finish, and it was pretty obvious that there was no proofreading. I don't want to say a lot of paper. There were some papers where when you read it, it doesn't make sense from start to finish because the sentences, the construction of the sentences aren't complete. So reread your paper. I understand that when you're writing a paper, you're moving thoughts around. So reread your paper from start to finish and see if it makes sense to you. And if you can read it and it makes sense to you, then go ahead and submit it. Those are the tips and tricks hopefully you guys can get for your next paper that's due this week. We had a family emergency last week, so apologize for getting the papers graded to you slightly later than normal. I'll have those all to you by Wednesday at the very latest. I've already had over half the class there, should already have their paper. Please don't submit this week's assignment without looking at the graded paper from the prior week. So you can make sure you don't repeat mistakes again. And as always, please reach out if you have any questions, and look forward to another great week.